This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
China's Foreign Minister Wang arrives in the Democratic Republic of Congo in the second leg of his Africa tour. Crucial Senate runoff elections in the U.S. state of Georgia still close to call. And the UK warns that a South African COVID-19 variant is highly infectious. Hello and a warm welcome to Africa Live on CGTN. I'm Lindy Mtongana in Nairobi. Also coming up this hour. Beijing vows countermeasures in response to Washington's ban on transactions with Chinese apps. And we bring you the story of Cameroon's Karine Fomo, who's been nominated to referee at the 2023 FIFA Women's World Cup. In our top story this hour, China's State Councillor and Foreign Minister Wang Yi has held a meeting with his DRC counterpart, Marie Ntumbe in the capital, Kinshasa. The two in Asia. He also said China will help the DRC in its fight against the COVID-19 pandemic. China is the DRC's biggest trading partner and the fifth largest investment destination in Africa. Well, earlier we spoke to David Otto Ndele, the Director of Strategic Programs at the Geneva Center for Africa Security and Strategic Studies. He explained the significance of Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi's visit to the DRC.
I think it is very significant, especially for the long-term diplomatic, economic, political, and kind of a security relations that the DRC has had with the Chinese People's Republic. This is not that China is exchanging visits to the DRC. They've had an extensive relations that has been since the 1970s, if not before that. So I think it's important for the fairly new government of the Republic of Congo, DRC, to be able to really exploit a win-win situation between the DRC and China, because it's important to always have that sincere but also bilateral benefit from the economic and also the political strength of China. I think the most important thing is for that relationship that is already existing to be maintained. Each country, should have a priority. For the DRC, I would believe that one of the key priorities for them would be matters of security. I mean, we witnessed attacks, in the northern part of Congo, especially in the Kivu region. So I think one of the most important aspects, that would drive economic stability or any economic relations with, China or any other country would be the stabilization of the DRC. Remember that, DRC is neighbors to Central African Republic, where, rebel groups are currently, having a very, powerful stand, especially out of Bangui. So I think, what, China and DRC should be is how to enhance the cooperation beyond, or, stabilize the current cooperation, but also beyond economic and other infrastructural developments. To be able to secure these infrastructures, you need security. So security would be one of the key areas.
Well, before heading to the Democratic Republic of Congo, Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi was in Nigeria, where he held talks with his counterpart on matters related to trade, health and infrastructure development. Phil Ihaza has more.
It's been a busy day for the Chinese foreign minister. In fact, a busy week and it's going to be like that from Mondays on to Saturday, where he's visited Nigeria, where he also had a long discussion with his counterpart, the Nigerian foreign minister, Geoffrey Onyema, where they discussed quite a number of issues relating to trade and commerce, health, and of course infrastructural development. The Chinese foreign minister also pledged to help Nigeria gain access to vaccines and also boost the health sector until COVID is over. He also to improve the infrastructural development, some of the projects that are ongoing to see how more Chinese companies can come into the country and invest. The Nigerian Foreign Minister Geoffrey Onyema also stated that the Chinese government has pledged to donate 100 million Chinese yuan, that's about $16 million, also to boost the country's economy. At the moment, Nigeria's economy is under recession, and the Chinese government says that a lot of these discussions around trade and commerce, which includes modalities about having Nigerian airlines travel to China directly without having to make any stops and vice versa, is part of things that would improve business activities among both countries. So these and many more were part of the discussions that the Chinese foreign minister had with the Nigerian foreign minister and other ministers in attendance. He also visited the President Muhammadu Buhari, at the presidential villa, where President Buhari thanked the Chinese foreign minister and of course the Chinese government for their long support in improving Nigeria's infrastructural development, which has actually been the tradition for the past 30 years, where Chinese government officials visit Africa as their first stop at the beginning of every year.
Let's now go to the United States, specifically the state of Georgia, where vote counting continues in two Senate runoff races. With at least 97% of the ballots counted, Democratic challenger Raphael Warnock is projected to unseat Republican incumbent Kelly Loeffler. In the second runoff, Republican David Perdue, who's seeking a second term, is in a virtual tie with Pat John Ossoff. A final outcome is not expected until later on Wednesday. Democrats will gain control of the Senate if they win both seats. For nearly 20 years, Georgia has voted reliably Republican in the presidential election and Senate contests. But Biden pulled off a shock victory there in November, one of several states that he flipped to win the White House. So why is it critical for Biden that the Democrats then be reliant on them to enact key policy measures? Now, United Nations officials have paid tribute to fallen peacekeepers from Burundi, Bangladesh and Cameroon. The peacekeepers died while on duty in the Central African Republic on different occasions. 3 Burundian peacekeepers were slain on Christmas Day by armed men ahead of elections. A Cameroonian was killed in a road accident, while the Bangladeshi blue helmet officer fell ill. Among those in attendance were the Special Representative of the UN Secretary General, Mankere Ndiaye, and CAR's Minister of Defense, Marie-Noëlle Koyara.
I want to recall that these 5 brave men died so that the flame of hope and peace burns in the Central African land. They died so that the Central African population could live in security and dignity, could exercise their civic duty to vote in a highly dangerous and volatile context exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic, despite the economic and health fragility that still strikes the Central African Republic. They have paid the price for their commitment and for the ideal we all share, to make this world and this country a better place.
Even though it is a moment of sorrow, we deem it prudent to honor and celebrate their greatness and sacrifice they made in the line of duty and service to humanity.
A diplomatic rift between several Gulf countries is now officially over. This after Saudi Arabia hosted a Gulf Cooperation Council summit, which Egypt had been invited to and which eventually ended the disagreement that lasted for more than 3 years. Delegations have signed an agreement that now commits the GCC nations to refraining from interfering in each other's domestic politics, and which also ends a blockade on Qatar. Here's Adil Al-Makhraoui with those details.
With the promising new touristic destination of El Ola in the background of the talks, Saudi Arabia has once again led regional unity efforts. Leaders and delegations from the Kingdom, UAE, Bahrain and Egypt have all signed a reconciliation accord with Qatar. The document officially ends the 3.5-year-long diplomatic and business blockade on Qatar.
We were finally able to reach a mechanism that was satisfactory to everyone, and I am happy to report that we are at a place where everyone is satisfied and happy. And yes, all the outstanding whether it's the returning of diplomatic relations, flights, etc., all of that will now go back to normal.
Following the Gulf Cooperation Council summit, the Saudi foreign minister confirmed that all nations will stand together against any threat to regional or national security, and that no nation shall interfere in the domestic affairs of another or harm its national unity.
The return to strong ties will take time. It's been more than 3 years. During that time, there was more of a political and media war. It will definitely take some time for the wounds caused then to heal. We just hope that Qatar's blending with its regional partners will be smooth, and that this will reflect positively on regional security.
Egypt, Saudi Arabia, UAE and Bahrain had in 2017 declared 13 demands before mending ties with Qatar. The list included banning specific groups on their terror list and shutting down the Qatari government-funded Al Jazeera news channel. After the summit, the UAE said the points were negotiable.
The Declaration of Principles in Cairo in 2017 was very clear. This is what Saudi Arabia has based its negotiations on. The points are mainly about supporting stability and security of the 4 nations and the region overall. This is what has been achieved.
This reconciliation will revive investment and trade between the 5 Arab nations involved in this diplomatic rift. It will also give a break to residents and travelers to Doha from the hectic indirect flights that have ached and restricted travel for more than 3.5 years. Adel Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
Well, time now for a short break. Here's what's still ahead on the program. The UK warns that a South African COVID-19 variant is highly infectious. Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climate and enchanting geography, and a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent to bring you the untold stories. Let's have a look. We celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
Aden, Tunis, Cairo, Juba, Johannesburg, Ethiopia, Tanzania.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
I try to not let it affect me, but there are days when it does. I'm a human being, and to see patients in a hospital bed and their family members are not there, there's no one there to hold their hand, that human touch, you know?
I just hope everyone can remember that the situation is not permanent and that everything will get better eventually.
UK Health Secretary Matt Hancock says the new COVID-19 variant identified in South Africa poses a bigger risk than the highly infectious UK variant. And that's why the country has restricted all flights from South Africa. Here's CGTN's Angela Coppola with more.
Technically, the South African and UK variants are different, but both are placing huge challenges on health systems in those countries.
The theory is that those mutations have allowed the virus, via its spike protein, to bind more tightly to the receptor on our human cells. In other words, allowing it to infect the cells more effectively and therefore becoming more infectious.
Now, so far in South Africa, we haven't seen an increase in mortality, and we haven't seen a change in the disease pattern. And I think the same would be true for the UK variant as well. But clearly, we're continuing to look very hard at this. It's early days, and we would need to continue to monitor this.
Experts are still gathering information about the virus variants and whether the current batch of vaccines will be effective against the recently discovered ones.
So there is a bit of concern that these variants may not be as effective with the vaccines as they are currently manufactured. However, from the research I've done, most of these pharmaceutical companies say that it won't take much to manipulate or tweak that vaccine to make it as effective as before.
It is a theoretical concern that the vaccines might be less effective, but this is currently being investigated. In a few weeks' time, we'll be able to get answers to this. One of the good things about some of the technologies of the vaccines under development is that it will be feasible to change the vaccines should they be less effective against the new variants.
As the debate amongst academics and scientists continues around the efficacy of the current batch of vaccines to deal with the new variants, we have to wait and see because we don't have enough data yet. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Parkhurst, South Africa.
Well, Egypt is finalizing a national plan to administer COVID-19 vaccines. The country is expected to begin releasing the jab next week for an inoculation exercise. It has so far received 50,000 doses of the Chinese Sinopharm vaccine and is expecting more by the end of the month. Here's Adel El-Makhroui with the details.
After giving the official green light for the administering of China's Sinopharm COVID-19 vaccine, Egypt is finalizing its distribution plan for the jab. Cairo has so far signed contracts for the delivery of 50 million vaccines, 80% of which are from Sinopharm.
The Chinese vaccine is one of the vaccines that has proven safety and effectiveness. It is one of the favorite vaccines for Egypt and has been cleared by the government to be administered to Egyptians. China has been cooperating with us since the beginning of the pandemic, and we hold continuous webinars through which we have learned more about the pandemic together.
The government is currently reviewing its demographic and health data so as to create priority lists identifying the citizens who are most vulnerable to the disease.
We are currently preparing the population data. We will start with the most vulnerable, and registration will be available online for those who wish to participate. We will then expand to the public. We are using the data collected from 100 health campaigns to form a list of cancer patients, those who have suffered kidney failures, and so on.
The 100 Million Health is a massive healthcare campaign that started in 2018. Egypt launched it to help diagnose cases of hepatitis C, breast cancer, and non-communicable disease. That has given the country key health information about tens of millions of its citizens, data which has since become valuable in determining who should get the vaccine. Health Ministry says that it will launch an online website for COVID-19 vaccine registration and that it will start administering the vaccine by mid-January. Health workers treating COVID-19 patients will be the first in line to receive. Adel El-Makhroui, CGTN, Cairo.
Zimbabwe has meanwhile postponed the reopening of schools after an increase in COVID-19 cases forced the government to reinstate strict lockdown measures. Students had been expected to resume classes on January 4th, but the government only allowed O and A-level candidates to return to learning institutions to sit for their exams. Farai Makutoya has more.
These are meant to be in class, but they've had to find ways to keep themselves occupied at home, where they'll be stuck for at least 30 more days. Their mother is worried that their continued forced absence from school could be damaging.
It may take as many as 4 or 5 years before there's a solution to the pandemic. So I think schools should continue with the preventative measures, distancing and washing hands, or else our children will be left behind. They have already lost a year, and now they're going to the next grade. But what future do they have if they've lost out an entire year?
One of the biggest challenges is that not all schools are equipped to observe the recommended prevention guidelines. This is Kuvinga's son goes to school. There are more than 60 students in his class.
Alternate the days that they go to school to manage congestion.
But not everyone is keen to see schools reopen. Medical experts say the internet-crowded schools would expose more than just the students.
The problem is the young person, they take it home to their dad or their mom who happens to be hypertensive or diabetic. And that's where the problem is. So we're in complete agreement. This was a matter of life and death.
In the absence of physical learning, some schools have online classes instead. However, underprivileged and rural students could fall behind because their schools do not have resources to implement remotely. Farai Mwakutuya, CGTN, Harare, Zimbabwe.
And now the latest on the coronavirus situation in China. The Chinese mainland on Tuesday reported 32 new cases. 9 are imported, while 23 are local transmissions. 20 of the local transmissions were reported in northern China's Hebei province. 1 each was reported in eastern Liaoning province and Heilongjiang province. Meanwhile, confirmed coronavirus cases in the United States have now reached 21 million, with the death toll surpassing 350. Several states are looking to expand their vaccination efforts to include first responders and vulnerable populations. This comes as a record number of people have been hospitalized across the country. Our correspondent Edith Tianson reports from Los Angeles.
Centers have been converted to so-called alternate care facilities, as the state governor warns about another surge on top of a surge in the coming weeks.
Just put it in perspective, the last 14 days, close to 4,000 Californians have lost their lives. This is a deadly disease. This is a deadly pandemic. It remains more deadly today at any point in the history of this pandemic.
Health officials are pushing to expand testing and vaccination efforts. In hard-hit Los Angeles, the county's largest testing site in Dodger Stadium resumed its operations following the holiday break, with increased capacity to accommodate an additional 600 to 800 vehicles. In the meantime, inoculations have been expanded to include first responders.
Eases my mind a little bit to be a little bit more helpful, be a little bit more hands-on, and not so concerned about going on a call with a COVID patient that's tested positive, or anyone that shows symptoms.
The U.S. federal government has distributed more than 15 million vaccines across the country, but only around 4.5 million doses have actually been administered through Monday, prompting some states to consider incentives for certain groups to be vaccinated, while New York is considering penalties for hospitals that lag behind.
Any provider who does not use the vaccine could be fined up to $100,000. Going forward, they have to use the allocation within 7 days. Otherwise, they can be removed from future distribution.
It's a race against time to vaccinate as many people as quickly as possible. December marked the deadliest month of the pandemic in the U.S. Things are not any better to start the new year. And if the trend continues, we'll likely see a deeper crisis for many medical facilities that are already at a breaking point. It is Tianshan, CGTN, Los Angeles.
Well, time now for a short break. Your business news up next. Coming up, concerns over the sale of illicit alcohol in South Africa during lockdown. And Beijing vows countermeasures in response to Washington's ban on transactions with Chinese apps. Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climates and enchanting geography, and a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent to bring you the untold stories. Let's have a look. We celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
Tunis, Cairo,
Syria,
Juba,
Johannesburg,
Ethiopia, Tanzania.
Africa Live. Find your voice. Africa Live. Find your voice. In your business news, Beijing has hailed the potential of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, which came into effect on January 1st. China says it could create new opportunities for China-Africa cooperation. A foreign ministry spokesperson also spoke highly of China's new free trade deal with Mauritius.
China and Africa will jointly hold a new session of the Forum on China-Africa Cooperation. Anti-COVID cooperation, economic recovery and transitional development will be major topics of this meeting. And we will build new consensus for unity and expand new areas for cooperation. We believe that the African Continental Free Trade Area and the China-Mauritius Free Trade Deal will bring new opportunities for cooperation.
Well, China and Mauritius signed that free trade agreement back in 2019. It covers trade in goods and services and investment and economic cooperation. Officials say it will help to strengthen bilateral economic and trade relations, as well as China-Africa cooperation. Meanwhile, the Africa Continental Free Trade Area deal was signed by 54 African Union member states. It covers a market of more than 1.2 billion people and up to $3 trillion in combined GDP. The agreement aims to encourage trade between African nations by creating a single market for goods and services. Now, less than a week into a nationwide ban on the sale of alcohol, South Africa's liquor industry has warned the public to be aware of illicit liquor products. This comes after a company dealing in alcohol reported that thousands of bottle caps had been stolen in a break-in. President Cyril Ramaphosa banned the sale of alcohol on the 28th of December in a move aimed at curbing a second wave of coronavirus infections that have pushed the country's cumulative COVID-19 caseload past the 1 million mark. Two previous alcohol bans in South Africa resulted in over 7,000 job losses and about $970 million lost in sales. While South Africa's new restrictions on socioeconomic activity are indeed expected to slow the country's economic recovery in what is Africa's most industrialized economy. And that's according to Citigroup, one of the world's top investment banks. Citi says growth forecasts for 2021 face downward revisions and debt could exceed 100% of GDP in the 2022-23 fiscal year. CGTN's Angela Coppola explains.
South African growth forecasts for 2021 face downward revisions and debt may exceed 100% of GDP in the 22-23 fiscal year. But there is an immediate impact as the hospitality sector will bear the brunt of the new restrictions.
The economic impact will obviously be quite severe, particularly in the liquor industry, in the hospitality industry, the restaurant industry. But at the time the president made the announcement to take us to lockdown level 3, we did say, and we still maintain, that he didn't have too much of a choice.
The announcement came in the middle of the traditional holiday high season. Hotels catering for foreign and domestic travelers will be the hardest hit.
These hotels that are looking at foreigners rely on the 4-5 months from November to the beginning of March for about 60% of their income. The other fact is the local hotels and the local guest houses rely about for 40% of their income for the 2 weeks leading up to Christmas to the beginning of school term and just thereafter.
To make matters worse, government hasn't provided any support to businesses or workers.
We will also be interacting with social partners at NEDLAC, at the COVID Rapid Response Task Team that's been meeting since the advent of COVID, to see what the possibilities are of government extending some sort of support to businesses and employees that might be impacted.
South Africa, a bit unique in that we've enforced business closures, but we don't allow for help to come through. That seems to be very much a problem in the poorer countries, but South Africa is a higher middle income country, should not have that problem, but yet we do. And that is going to have a devastating impact on the economy.
The latest lockdown is expected to be revised on 15 January. It all depends on the infection rates and whether they have come down or not. A new approach has been suggested.
For instance, the hotspots that have been declared, what's been the impact there? Are those still going up? Are those still hotspots? Have they worsened? If so, can we make appropriate targeted interventions in those hotspots, in those areas where we're seeing exponential increases in the virus, instead of having a general...
There's no question that this latest lockdown has had an impact on the hospitality sector over that December period. The question now is whether that lockdown is extended beyond the 15th of January. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Braamfontein, South Africa.
In Nigeria, rising cases of COVID-19 have led to a contraction in manufacturing activities. According to a report by the Central Bank of Nigeria, the Manufacturing Purchasing Managers Index for the month of December 2020 stood at 49.6 index points. The sector relapsed from 50.2 points recorded in the month of November. CGTN's Kelechi Emekalam reports.
This paint company, MP Colors Limited, is run by Darlington Okoye and employs over 50 workers. From grinding to mixing and dispersion, the factory in Nigeria's capital Abuja has been trying to keep up with production, producing all kinds of paint products. But lately, production's been cut by nearly half. Okoye says importing raw materials is becoming more difficult.
Our production capacity before lockdown used to be about 1,500 buckets of paint every blessed day. And after the lockdown, shortly after the lockdown, business resumed and it even increased. Then there was enough chemicals and raw materials for production. But as at November, December, the pressure was high, no materials to meet up with demand. It's really affected our production capacity. It has to reduce automatically. So as we talk now, the production capacity that was almost getting to 2,000 daily now dropped to less than 1,000. So you can imagine that the effect of this pandemic actually affected our production.
The surge in cases of COVID-19 has led to restrictions in movement, and there are concerns that governments may be gearing up for another lockdown. That has led to a decline in manufacturing activities in December. The Purchasing Managers Index by the Central Bank puts the manufacturing index at 49.6 points as against a recorded growth of 50.2 points in the preceding month. Experts say additional factors like importation, volatile foreign exchange, and infrastructure deficit are responsible for the contraction.
We need to restructure our industrial base because, as I said, 80% of the manufacturing activities here are dependent on imported raw materials. And we need to shift that balance to processing much of our locally produced materials. Some of the binding constraints facing the manufacturing sector is power. Power accounts for 30% of their input costs. And transportation network has even gone worse. That accounts for 20% of the input cost. So just between these two is 50% of the input cost.
Nigeria's government has been commended for interventions in the manufacturing sector, and that includes the over $2.5 billion intervention fund. With this, key players are optimistic that the manufacturing sector will bounce back soon. Kelechi Emekalam, CGTN Abuja, Nigeria.
Gulf Arab leaders have signed an agreement on solidarity and stability at a summit aimed at ending an embargo against Qatar by its neighbors. The contents of the document were not immediately released, but ahead of the gathering, Kuwait announced that Saudi Arabia would reopen its airspace and borders to Qatar under a deal whose signing would be witnessed by White House senior advisor Jared Kushner. Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain and Egypt severed diplomatic, trade and travel ties with Qatar in mid-2017 over allegations Doha supported terrorism, a charge it continues to deny. The breakthrough is the latest in a series of Middle East deals sought by Washington. Others include those involving Israel and Arab states aimed at building a united front against Iran. Lady Bucket and the Motley Mobsters, Nigeria's first feature-length animated movie, is diversifying Africa's largest film industry, Nollywood. The film is set in the heart of the country's first discovered oil field site, Olubiri. It follows the tale of a self-indulgent girl who learns to navigate the intricacies of unconventional friendships and personal growth with the help of mythical creatures. With that story, here's CGTN's Mohammed Abubakar.
Credited as the second largest movie industry in the world, Nollywood has conquered the drama, the comedy, even dabbled in horror cult films and produced the occasional thriller. Animation, however, has eluded the industry, not until Lady Bucket and the Motley Mobsters. The story, conceived in 2017, is making history as Nigeria's first feature-length animated film to make it to the big screens.
We thought, okay, hey, why don't we create a series based on these characters so that kids can familiarize themselves with the characters before actually showing up to the facility. And so we began to work on a series, and then the 3D modeling, started, and all of that. When we saw the characters, it was love at first sight.
The cinematic release of Lady Bucket and the Motley Mobsters hit theaters both locally and internationally on the 11th of December 2020. It's estimated that more than $1 million was invested in the production of the film. The initial plan was to build an entertainment facility reminiscent of Disneyland. But the team found creative animation houses in the country to collaborate with.
We're very, we tend to be risk averse, but I believe that this production is a source of inspiration to a lot of Nigerians. They are learning that we can actually do this. And I think that there will be a lot of experimentation, in animation.
Lady Bucket and Motley Mobsters follows the story of Bucky, a young girl whose search for answers leads her down a path of self-discovery. She inadvertently turns into a bucket and bonds with the most unusual characters. The 80-minute project features industry heavyweights such as veterans Patrick Doyle, Bimbo Akintola and Bola Edwards.
To our sustenance, the sustenance of our culture, of who we are as Africans. Bringing something like this to light has given us the opportunity to get our children to hear our stories and carry it on, preserve culture.
The Nigerian entertainment and media industry is estimated to hit the $10 billion mark by 2023. And with more releases like Lady Bucket and the Motley Mobsters, it's hoped that Nigeria will further cement its position as Africa's leading film producer, as well as a global force in creative storytelling and entertainment. Mohammed Abubakar, CGTN.
US President Donald Trump has signed an executive order banning transactions using 8 Chinese apps. The White House says the platforms covered include Alipay and WeChat Wallet. The move aims to protect Americans against the perceived threat from Chinese apps gaining large user bases and accessing sensitive data. But analysts say any new US bans could face court challenges similar to those over attempts to block WeChat and TikTok. Well, China says it will take all necessary measures to safeguard the legitimate rights of Chinese companies. This, of course, after President Donald Trump signed that order banning American transactions with those 8 Chinese apps.
I think this is another example of America overgeneralizing the concept of state security, abusing state power, and unjustly suppressing foreign companies. The Chinese companies involved certainly will be affected, but more importantly, the interests of the U.S. and its consumers will be hurt. We urge the U.S. side to respect the market economy and principles of fair competition, comply with international trading rules, and offer foreign enterprises an open, fair, just, and non-discriminatory business environment. China will take necessary measures to safeguard the legitimate rights and interests of Chinese enterprises.
Time now for a short break. Still ahead on the program. Healing through dance. We take a look at Tunisia's Stambali dance that's said to improve a person's well-being.
Join us in global business and see Africa through our eyes.
You're watching breaking news on CGTN.
Welcome to the world today on CGTN.
Stambali art is a Tunisian dance form practiced in many regions across the North African country. Those who practice it say it improves personal well-being. Adnan Chouachi tells us more.
This monthly Stambali art show is made up of transcendent music and dance, as well as religious chants. The ritual starts with prayers to usher in the new year.
Stambali is folklore and folk art. It's a very old cultural heritage which is rooted in the Tunisian society. It can be expressed in different ways and forms. Stambali is part of the rich mystic music, dance and traditions in North Africa.
Riyadh is a Stambali choreographer who practiced this rite in many regions across Tunisia and North Africa.
Stambali art is not limited to Tunisia. It is widespread in the region. It's known as Nawa in Morocco, Diwan in Algeria, Bakari in Libya, Bori in Mauritania. This ritual brings people together.
Hassan is a Stambali master from the city of Tozeur in southern Tunisia. He believes in the healing qualities of the ritual, which is produced by an ascending tempo of rhythmic music and a corresponding increased speed of the participants' movements of head and extremities.
Attending a Stambali ritual can help many people feel better as they sing and dance to enter the trance state. This is not medicine, it's rather an exceptional art.
In January 1846, Tunisia abolished slavery. Tunisian historians say the history of Stambali goes back to the arrival of the first slaves to the North African state. Some 20 Tunisian troops still perpetuate and promote African traditions in Stambali shows. The Ministry of Culture and the civil society plan to organize a Stambali festival this year. It will bring together international troops, masters, musicians and dancers who will share this Tunisian art and cultural heritage of humanity. Adnan Chouachi, CGTN, Tunis.
Coming up in your sports news. We bring you the story of Cameroon's Karine Fomo, who's been nominated to referee at the 2023 FIFA Women's World Cup.
would you create your legend? On the fields, on the tracks, in the arenas of Africa. Were you born to be a player? Could this moment be yours? Sports Scene. Find your game.
Africa Live. Find your voice. We start your sports news in Cameroon, where Karine Atezambong Fomo, the only female referee to officiate in the Men's Division 1 Football League in the country, has now been shortlisted for the 2023 FIFA Women's World Cup in Australia and New Zealand. Here's CGTN's Mohammed Abubakar with her story.
Karine Atezambong Fomo is a certified physical